Hare Krishna, Prabhus and Matajis, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I'm Subha and I'll be your moderator for today. So before we start, allow me to recite the Mangla Charan. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnana Timirandasha Nananjana Salakaya Chaksur Ulminitam Yena Tasmi Sri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhudali Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Dadati Swa Padantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuttapada Kamlam Sri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadhitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Saha Gana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitamscha E Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopisa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhano Sude Devi Pranamami Aripriye Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bodhale Srimade Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurava Pracharini Nirvashesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarini Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Sivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna, Prabhus and Matajis. Welcome to today's Sunday class. Today we are going to have the pleasure of hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam discussed from His Grace Devakinandan Prabhu from Singapore. Prabhu is not any foreign to the BJF KL Academy, and yet we are truly privileged to have Prabhu's association in our Sunday classes. Though Prabhu needs no introduction, for the benefit of the new devotees, allow me to briefly introduce Prabhu before I pass over to His Grace. So His Grace is the president of iskcon Singapore and a disciple of His Holiness Mahavishnu Goswami Maharaj. His Grace is a practicing lawyer by profession and based in Singapore. By the order of His Grace, spiritual master, His Grace has been traveling extensively and preaching the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. His Grace is an expert preacher of Srimad Bhagavatam and a wonderful kirtan leader. Prabhu has inspired so many people in the path of Krishna consciousness. So without any further delay, let's welcome His Grace Devakinandan Prabhu to dive us into today's discussion. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Mataji, for welcoming me, and thank you to all devotees today for joining us again for this wonderful time spent together, understanding the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. I want to take the opportunity to thank all the devotees for joining us. You must have had a wonderful Janmashtami weekend. And so I also want to take this opportunity to wish you a very Krishna conscious, happy and blissful Janmashtami. I hope you had a wonderful time coming together and remembering Krishna. And then the day after was Srila Prabhupada's appearance. I hope you had a very good time remembering and being very grateful to Srila Prabhupada for all that he has given us. Today, let us continue hearing another wonderful episode from Srimad Bhagavatam. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudiraye nasta prayesha bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke Bhaktir bhavati naishtiki Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. There's a very beautiful verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. It actually comes from the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj. And in that prayer, in the 7th canto, 9th chapter, I think the verse is 9 also, 799. Prahlad Maharaj, when he's praying to Lord Nrsingadev, he chants a very important prayer which connects to our pastime today in Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, Manye dhana bijana rupa tapasruta ujas teja prabhava bala paurusha buddhi yogaha Naradhanaya hi bhavanti parasya pumso bhaktya tutosha bhagavan gajayutapaya. The translation is very beautiful. Prahlad Maharaj continued, one may possess wealth, aristocratic family, beauty, austerity, education, sensory expertise, luster, influence, physical strength, diligence, intelligence, and mystic yoga power. But I think that by even all these qualifications, one cannot satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, one can satisfy the Lord simply by devotional service. Gajendra did this, and thus the Lord was satisfied with him. This is an amazing shloka because it tells us two very important things. First, that Krishna is not bought or purchased by any amount of material qualifications. He's not. He's not even attracted by material qualifications. Why? Because everything material that we have is actually belonging to him. It's all coming from him. So why should he be impressed if we possess it? We are possessing it only because of a combination of some good pious activities that we had, or some hard work that attracts some punya, but it is all coming from him. So that doesn't attract Krishna. What satisfies Krishna and what attracts Krishna is one's devotional service. And the word that's used in the shloka is simply devotional service. In other words, devotional service which is simple, which is from the heart, which is not complicated, which is not based on speculation, that devotional service attracts Krishna. And then, this is very unusual, Prahlad Maharaj makes reference to another personality. He says, Gajayutapayaha. He says that Gajendra, the elephant, did this. In other words, he executed this kind of devotional service, and the Lord became very satisfied. So someone may ask from that shloka, okay, who is this Gajendra? You know, what did he do? And why is his episodes of, why is his pastime or what he did so great? What was his devotional service? Why was it so powerful that Supreme Personality of Godhead became satisfied with him? Gajendra means king of elephants, right? He's just an elephant. How could an elephant satisfy Krishna to that proportion when we human beings, if we possess so many capabilities, facilities? Why is it that Prahlad Maharaj, one great devotee of the Lord, one of the greatest devotees of the Lord, is actually citing the example of another great devotee? And Prahlad Maharaj is a very young boy, but he's remembering Gajendra as an example of a great personality. So who is Gajendra? And why is Gajendra so exalted? And that is the premise for our time together today, to remember the great pastime of Gajendra, the king of the elephants. And this pastime happens in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It starts from chapter 2, I think it runs to chapter 3. But it is really worth remembering this wonderful pastime. So let's spend some time today remembering the pastime of Gajendra, and we try to understand some of the very important points that we learn from the elephant. Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami tells us, that once upon a time, there was a very large mountain in the material universe, in the other planets of the material universe, known as Trikuta. And this Trikuta mountain is very big. It is like 80,000 miles by length and 80,000 miles by breadth. And the grounds of the mountains are always washed, by waves of milk, which were strewn by what we call emeralds. Within the mountain, Bhagavatam tells us, there was a very large garden, and that garden is known as Ritumat. And Bhagavatam extensively describes the beauty of that garden. The garden was so beautiful that within that garden, in the mountain, there were caves, and within those caves, the Devatas themselves would sometimes come, and they would spot in the caves because the caves were surrounded by beautiful mountain and lakes and gardens. And there were very beautiful wild animals, powerful wild animals, and they were moving around. And when they heard the Devatas chanting and singing and enjoying, they would, out of fear, move away from that place. In that garden, which is in the beautiful Trikuta mountains, Bhagavatam also tells us there was a very large lake. And that lake was filled with beautiful, shining, golden lotus flowers. The lake had beautiful other flowers growing. The lake was very, very scented with the smell of these flowers. And the lake was crowded with swans, with all kinds of birds, with cranes. It was surrounded by beautiful flowers like kadamba flowers, kubjaka flowers, and all these flowers and fruits, they were not smelling and blooming just one time. They were there for all seasons. And so this beautiful mountain was entirely decorated. One day, the leader of the elephants in that area, and he was known as Gajendra, he decided, because he lived in the mountains of Trikuta, once he wandered towards that lake with his female elephants and being king with his entourage of young, powerful male elephants. Even his children came with him. Bhagavatam tells us as he went through, because he was king of the elephants, he broke creepers, thickets, and trees. Anything that was in the path of the elephants, he just broke them. He did not even care for the piercing thorns because he was so powerful that nothing could touch him actually. Some animals that caught the scent of the elephant, even though they were powerful like lions and tigers and jackals, they all purposefully ran away. Those who were younger and smaller like rabbits and porcupines and monkeys, they were not afraid of Gajendra because he did not harm them, but they knew that he would protect them. And so surrounded by the herd's massive amount of elephants and followed by all the young ones, Bhagavatam tells us that Gajendra, the leader of the elephants, he made Trikuta mountain tremble just by the way he was walking. He was very, very big, much bigger than any elephant that we know. And as he was walking towards the mountain, he was walking because of the weight of his body in a very ponderous manner. Bhagavatam tells us he was perspiring and he appeared intoxicated because he was very thirsty after the water of the lake. Because he was so beautiful and so powerful, he was being served even by bumblebees that were hovering around him. Some of the honey that he had taken from the trees as he smashed through them were actually around him. And the smell and the taste of the honey was intoxicating. And so the bees and even Gajendra felt very intoxicated. In that way, he walked with great pride, surrounded by his associates who were also very thirsty. And they soon arrived at the bank of the lake. The king of the elephants then entered the lake with impudence because he was king. He created a big ruckus and he invited all his other elephants. Hundreds of elephants entered the lake and they created so much of disturbance. The king of the elephant led the way and he began drinking water and relieving his fatigue. With the aid of his trunk, after drinking water, he began spraying water on his children, on his wives, and his family was very important to him. So he was trying to show the rest of the elephants how much he was caring for his family. And in that way, Bhagavatam tells us, the elephant, Gajendra, being illusioned by the external energy of Krishna, thought himself to be truly king. And he thought that his wives and children, were under him and they were under his protection. And so he raised the water and with great endeavor, he sprayed it all over them, not realizing even for that moment that his endeavor would soon prove to be useless. We'll know that in a while. By the arrangement of providence, Bhagavatam tells us, in that same lake lived a very huge and powerful crocodile. This crocodile was disturbed by the disturbances created by the elephants. And when it looked around in the water, it saw that at the head of all this disturbance was the king of the elephants, Gajendra. It was the most powerful king. Even in the water, the size of Gajendra's legs, were very intimidating. But don't forget, the crocodile was the king of the lake, and therefore it was very powerful. And because it was seething with anger at this disturbance, it reacted, and it rushed for the leg of the elephant and attacked it. It clamped its jaws around the leg of the elephant. Even in the material world, if you know your animal history, you will know that the greatest bite force in the animal kingdom, right, belongs to that of the crocodile. Its bite force is so strong that when it clamps on something, you cannot take it, you cannot extricate it from the mouth and the jaws of the crocodile. So what to speak of this crocodile in Trikuta mountain? So Bhagavatam says the elephant was certainly strong, Gajendra, So he tried his best, to unshackle himself from this great danger that was sent by providence. Very interesting how Bhagavatam says danger sent by providence. Very often we speak of danger, but we don't think about where danger comes from. Bhagavatam makes it very clear here that danger is also part of providence. It's part of the arrangement of this material world where we are constantly reminded that there are dangers at every step of our lives. Padam, padam, na vipadam tatesham. This is the important point. At every step of our material life, there is always a crocodile. There's always providence. Now, Gajendra tried very hard to shake off the crocodile with his own strength. He tried pushing it, but the crocodile refused to leave. A great battle ensued between Gajendra and the crocodile, but Gajendra couldn't shake it off. When the other elephants saw Gajendra in this grave condition, what did they do? The great generals came and they tried to pull Gajendra out from the shackles of the crocodile, but it was to no avail. His wives now began panicking. And they started feeling that they also must help. They were strong elephants. They also pulled and pulled Gajendra, but they could not pull him out. And then Bhagavatam tells us they begin to feel very sorry for Gajendra, and being soft-hearted, they begin to cry. The other elephants again tried to help Gajendra. The little children elephants, they were helpless to see their father. But because of the crocodile's great strength, they could not rescue him. Even as they tried to grasp him from behind, they could not. And in this way, Bhagavatam tells us, the king of the elephant, because he was pulled into the water more and more, he was already halfway in the water. And he was fighting not just for one day, he fought for many, many, many long years. In fact, Bhagavatam says the crocodile held him for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. What happened to Gajendra? After 1,000 years of battle, and not being on land, but being in water where he's not naturally strong, Gajendra became diminished in his mental, his physical, and his sensual strength. All his senses, his physique, his mental strength, they all begin to diminish. The crocodile, on the other hand, Bhagavatam tells us, was just the opposite. It was a creature of the water, isn't it? So it increased its enthusiasm. Because in water, it was in its own playground, and its physical strength and its sensual power, they begin increasing. Prabhupada makes a very important distinction here. This verse appears in the purport of, I think, 8th canto, 2nd chapter, I think the verse is 30. In that purport, Prabhupada makes a very important point. Prabhupada says there that during the 1,000 years of fighting, don't forget, Gajendra could not get any food. He could not get any water. Why? Because it was not his area. The crocodile, he was very strong. He was in his natural habitat. And Prabhupada says, our Krishna consciousness, this movement of Krishna consciousness, recognizes one very important point, that we are living in the material world. This material world is really not the place we belong to. That is why if you live in this material world without devotional service, your mental faculties, your physical strength, your sensual prowess, they all diminish and deteriorate over time. We call it age, but it is actually diminishing of our powers. Because actually, by the illusory power of Maya, we think we belong to this material world, but actually we don't. So when you're suffering in the material world, remember how as Gajendra was being held in the water, and water was not the natural place for him, he was naturally becoming weak. And because we are also not naturally inclined to be in this world, because we are by nature spiritual entities, eventually if we are not fixed in our devotional service in this material world, the crocodile of this material existence, by the will of providence, will teach us a very good lesson. That is why Bhagavatam tells us that we should be very careful to understand that without devotional service, we have no anchor in the spiritual world. We will only be anchored into the material world. And so the king of the elephant saw that he was now under the clutches of the crocodile. This is a very important shloka. In 8.2.31, Gajendra now saw something very important. 8.2.31 and 32 of Srimad Bhagavatam tells us the consciousness and the attitude of a devotee who's put in a situation of danger. All of us will be put in a situation of danger. Some of us may be right now in a situation of danger. You're just getting relief hearing Bhagavatam, but around you, there's so much danger, anxiety, and difficulty. Well, how do you handle it? What do we do? Bhagavatam tells us. In 8.2.31, Gajendra starts singing a very beautiful prayer. Itham Gajendra Sayadapa Sankatam Pranasya Dehi Vivasho Yadrichaya Aparayanatma Vimokshane Chiram Dadhya Vimam Buddhimatapya Bhadyata. And what does the translation say? When the king of the elephants saw he was under the clutches of the crocodile, by the will of providence, it is also Krishna's arrangement, because he created this material world because we wanted to be separate from him, but it is his creation. And therefore the king of the elephants embodied and circumstantially helpless. Very important word. Vivasha means circumstantially helpless. Have you been in situations, Prabhus and Matajis, where you have the will, you want to do something, you think you have the capability, but the circumstances are not helping you? You turn this way, you can't move. You turn this way, you can't move. Circumstantially, you don't want an outcome, but it is staring at you in your face. So Gajendra was in that situation. He could not save himself from danger, Bhagavatam tells us. He was extremely afraid of being killed. And what did he do now? He consequently thought for a long time. That is what we must do when danger is in front of us. We must stop everything, pull the brakes, and we must think very carefully. Why am I in this situation? Dadhyao means to think seriously. This is what a devotee does. Why am I in this situation? And finally, he reached a decision. This is very important. And what was his decision? 8.2.32 tells us what his decision was. In 8.2.32 of Srimad Bhagavatam, he sings very nicely. Namami me nyatara aturam gajaha kuta karinya prabhavanti mochitam grahena pashena vidatu avrito apiyaham chatam yami paramparayanam. See the word paramparayanam. Param means who is transcendental, and parayanam means who is the shelter of even the exalted devatas like Brahma and Shiva. So this is what now Gajendra was thinking. And see his thinking now. He had so much pride. Don't forget, when he was on land, he was intoxicated with his strength. But now, after being caught by circumstantially helpless providence, now see what he says. The other elephants who are my friends and relatives, they could not rescue me from this danger. What then to speak of my wives? They cannot do anything. It is by the will of providence that I have been attacked by this crocodile. And therefore, I shall seek shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always the shelter of everyone, even of great personalities. See the mood of Gajendra. This is what we must also think, Prabhus and Matajis, when we are in difficulty. When we are in difficulty, we should ask ourselves, who can really help us? How many times we have turned to our friends, our loved ones, our dear ones, our nearest and dearest. But in times of calamity, they cannot help us. They are also caught in the net. How can they save us from the net? They can't. It's a very important point. That is the first step towards accepting Krishna. When you accept that no one else in this world can save you from dangers, calamities, difficulties, anxieties, except Krishna, that is the mood of a devotee. Such a devotee is known as pious. That is why in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says so nicely, Chaturvida bhajante mam, janaha sukritino arjuna, arto jignaso artati, jnani cha bharata rishabha. There, Krishna makes it very clear to Arjuna that 4 kinds of persons, they are declared to be pious. They are declared to be devotees. They may not be pure devotees, but they are devotees. And who are they? They are the ones who are inquisitive. They are the ones who are searching for knowledge. They are the ones who are in need of money. And they are the ones who are in danger. Gajendra was now in danger. Instead of wasting his time trying to find remedial measures which would not help him, he turned to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, of 31 of the 31st verse. And Prabhupada says, the king of the elephant decided to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. And After considerable thought, he intelligently arrived at this correct decision. Prabhupada says, such a decision is not reached by a sinful man. Instead, it is reached by a pious sukriti, by a pious devotee. Only a pious devotee who's in a dangerous, awkward situation will turn to Krishna for shelter. So we must understand, sometimes we think Bhagavatam is speaking only of pure devotees. Gajendra did not start his devotional service as a pure devotee. Maybe not, but there's more to the story than that. But hold on. At least in this life as an elephant, it appears like he did not start at all like a devotee. But he was in distress. And the moment we're in distress, if we turn to Krishna, Krishna accepts that person as a devotee. What a nice point it is. What a nice point it is. And therefore, Gajendra realized the power of danger. You know, in Bhagavatam, I think it's in the same prayers of Prahlad Maharaj. I forget the actual shloka, but I can tell you when I remember. In that shloka 7.9.19 of Srimad Bhagavatam, there Prahlad Maharaj exactly says what Gajendra is feeling. Balasya neha sharanam pitarau narsingha nartasya chagadam udanvati majjato nahuhu taptasya tat pratividya rihanja sheshtas tavad vibho tanubritam twarupekshitanam. See what Prahlad Maharaj is saying. O Supreme Lord, because of the bodily conception of life, those of us who are neglected or not cared by you, we cannot do anything for our improvement. The moment we leave the shelter of Krishna, we neglect him. And those who neglect Krishna, Krishna will reciprocate. If you want to neglect me, then I will also stay away from you. But if you want to come to me in distress, of course I will come to you to save you. Now look at what Prahlad Maharaj says. Whatever remedies those who do not want to accept Krishna's help, whatever remedies they have, they are temporary. So the benefit is not there for a long time. And he gives three very important examples that you and I can relate to. A father and mother may want to really protect their child. But if the child is very sick, or if the child is going to die, what can the father and mother do? It is a helpless situation, circumstantially. Second point, a physician and the best medicine in the world may be there, but what is the point if it cannot relieve a suffering patient? It can't. Someone who's on the verge of death, even the best medical practice and doctors cannot save him. And the third point is very nice. What is the point of having a boat in the ocean when it cannot actually help a drowning man? I'm drowning in the ocean and I see a boat. The problem is the boat is too far and I can't swim. That's why I'm drowning. What is the point of the boat? Imagine the last thing I will see as I go down into the water to my death is a boat that cannot save me. And this is the point that Prahlad Maharaj is saying. And this is the point that also Gajendra is actually thinking. He also realizes that we can never be happy without the mercy and protection of Krishna. If we keep on trying to displease our Supreme Father by not turning to him in any moment, then we can only be temporarily happy in this material world, like Gajendra did, but we will never be fully happy. We will never be fully happy. And so Gajendra, in these two verses, he came to the right conclusion. He decided, let me now pray to that person who is the source of all shelters. Remember this. Gajendra did not mention Krishna because being an elephant body, he did not have the consciousness to exactly know who is that supreme person. So he could not use the word Krishna, but Gajendra could start praying. And so he started making his beautiful prayers. But before he could say his prayers, he said one more very important point that ends the chapter. Yakasninesho balino antataraga prachanda vegad abhidhavato brisham beetam prapannam paripati adbhayan mrityu pradavati aranam tamimami. The translation is very nice. He says, and this is in the last verse of the second chapter, 33rd verse. He says that Supreme Personality of Godhead is certainly not known to anyone. So you see, he's so humble that he knows that I don't know who the Supreme is. I know there is a Supreme, but I don't know him. But I know he's very powerful and he's very influential. The serpent of eternal time can endlessly chase anyone, ready to swallow him. But if the Lord gives that person protection, even death will run away in fear of the Lord. I therefore surrender to him, that great, powerful, supreme authority who's the actual shelter of everyone. And in that way, Gajendra then did something very wonderful. And in the first verse of the next chapter, he does something amazing, 831. He does something amazing. And I want to share this verse because this verse will tell us what we should do when we are in danger and what we should do when we are in danger. And this is what he did. Evam vyavasito buddhya samadhaya manohridi jajapa paramam japyam pragjanmani anushikshitam. See what he did. Thereafter, the king of the elephants, Gajendra, he fixed his mind in his heart with perfect intelligence. Three things very important to our faculties: mind, intelligence, and heart. Mind and intelligence are next door neighbors. The mind can run with the senses, but intelligence can grab the mind. But the heart is the seat of Krishna. How do you get the mind and heart and the intelligence to sit in the heart? That's what Gajendra did. Gajendra fixed his mind in his heart, because heart is where Krishna is. And he used intelligence to bring the mind in. Where was this intelligence? In all the shlokas we just chanted. The way he was thinking, that was governed by intelligence. So his mind may have been disturbed, but he roped it in with intelligence. He saw the situation with intelligence, and then he fixed it in his heart. Because no matter how intelligent we are, we need our heart to remember Krishna. With feeling only we can remember Krishna. And with all that, he chanted a mantra which he had learned in his previous birth as Indradyumna, and which he now remembered by the grace of Krishna. Amazing, isn't it? So now we understand one thing, Prabhus and Matajis. In the past life, Gajendra was actually a king. He was a great king known as Indradyumna. We'll come to that story in a while. But now we understand that somehow or another, because he was a devotee in previous life, that is why Krishna gave him a chance to remember shlokas. Otherwise, how can an elephant remember shlokas? But anything is possible for anyone by the grace of Krishna. That's why you see that word there. If Krishna wants, even a blind man can speak, a blind man can see, and a lame man can cross mountains, isn't it? And therefore, by Krishna's grace, this great elephant in great danger, he had the ability to remember Krishna. And so because Krishna allowed him to remember shlokas from his previous life, not even this life, from his previous life, the elephant now chanted the great Gajendra's prayers in a time of crisis. He chanted many, many prayers. We don't have time, otherwise we could go through all the prayers. But in every prayer that he chanted, he was glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And at the end of his 24 prayers, he chanted 24 or 23 prayers. At the end of all that, Gajendra then ended by saying something very important. He said, I do not wish to live anymore after I am released from the attack of this crocodile. Isn't it startling? If I were in Gajendra's position, I would pray very hard to come out of the clutches of crocodiles so that after that I can go back to my friends, my relatives, my children, and my wives, and continue as Gajendra. But after devotional service touched the heart of Gajendra, what did he do? He came to this realization. He said, I don't wish to live like this anymore. If you come and rescue me, if I'm released from the attack of the crocodile, I don't want to live this way. What is the use of an elephant's body covered externally and internally by ignorance? What is the use? What is the use of any body? Not just anybody, but any body, sharir. What is the use of that body if it's covered by ignorance? And Gajendra ends by saying, I desire eternal liberation from the clutches of this of this network of providence, which is the crocodile. That covering, I know now, is not covered by the influence of time. Time will not touch that. And in that way, Gajendra ended his prayers. Now, while Gajendra was describing the supreme authority in all his 23 prayers, he never mentioned any particular person. But because he mentioned only that supreme authority, all the devatas who heard his prayers, Brahma, Shiva, Indra, Chandra, Surya, none of them approached him. Actually, they could have, right? They were also thinking in their heart, how come Gajendra is not calling us? How come he's not calling us? We are very powerful. We can help him. But they dare not come before Gajendra because in their hearts, they knew that they were not Paramparayanam. They were not Paramparayanam. They knew that only Lord Hari is the super soul, the Purushottama, the supreme personality of Godhead. Only he was qualified to receive the prayers. And true enough, the moment Gajendra finished his prayers, the moment he said his last point that I don't want to be in this situation, even after you release me, then he saw a most wondrous sight. He saw this beautiful form, the four-handed form of the Lord, coming as Lord Hari and coming beautifully on the back of Garuda. And as he came, he was carrying his disc, Sudarshan Chakra, his other weapons. He appeared beautiful on the back of Garuda. And with great speed, according to his desire, he appeared before Gajendra. And when he appeared before Gajendra, not only did he appear, but Bhagavatam tells us all the other devatas also appeared. Now, the question Prabhupada asked is, how come they appeared? They appeared because they realized that they had been offensive towards Krishna. In their minds, they were thinking, how come we were not called? And that is an offense. How can we challenge the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? So consequently, when Krishna appeared before Gajendra, the devatas also appeared. They also offered prayers to the Lord because they knew that they had offended him and they wanted to seek excuse from Krishna. Now, Gajendra, when he saw Krishna, he saw Krishna coming, he was almost arriving. What did he do? He did something so sweet, so transcendently sweet. Remember, 1,000 years had passed. He had diminished faculties of mental, emotional, physical, and sensual. He had nothing left with him. He had no strength. And yet, despite all the labor and pain, Bhagavatam says he was in acute pain. Despite all of that, he immediately, with great difficulty, plucked out a lotus flower from the lake. And he held it up as high as his trunk could hold it, just in respect and love and service to the Supreme Lord. And he said, "O my Lord, Narayana, Master of the universe, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances to you." This is such an amazing gesture. Sometimes, when we are performing devotional service, we're very tired. Janmashtami, we must have been fasting. And sometimes our mood is not very congenial to Krishna, isn't it? But see, Gajendra, in such a difficulty, he was still so eager to see Krishna. Prabhupada writes in the purport that when he saw the Lord coming in his way, in a feeble voice, but with great action of carrying the lotus, he gave it to the Lord. Why? A very important point. Prabhupada says, a devotee of the Lord does not consider a dangerous position to be dangerous. Very important. Gajendra started in a position of danger, but because of devotional service and faith, his mood towards danger, his attitude to danger changed. He did not consider it an unfavorable position. Instead, Bhagavatam tells us he considered it a favorable condition. And this is very important. Why? Because in Bhagavatam, there's a very nice shloka, that Brahmaji chants, 10, 14, 8 of Srimad Bhagavatam. And that shloka is used to describe Gajendra's mood in Bhagavatam. There it is very nicely stated, Tatte nukampam sushamikshamano bunjana evadmakritam vipakam hridvagvapurbir vidadan namaste jivetayo mukti padasadaya bhav. 10, 14, 8. Very beautiful verse. And in that shloka, Brahma is saying, my dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy on him, all the while patiently suffering for the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, with his words, with his body, that person is surely eligible for liberation because it has become his rightful claim. Two things are very important here. What Gajendra did and what Brahma is saying is that the attitude of devotees of the Lord is that when something bad happens to them or in their difficulty, they never blame Krishna. They never blame those around them. They don't blame the stars. They don't blame the moon. They don't blame anything. Yes, there may be some direct results or direct causes, but ultimately they know the reason why I'm suffering is because of my own previous misdeeds. This is mood of devotee. That's why a devotee is very peaceful. They don't do the blame game. Otherwise, in our congregations, we will become very disturbed, because every time some fault is there, we will blame someone. Oh, Prabhu, you never sent me this, you did this, you didn't do this, you should have done that. But devotees of the Lord, genuine devotees, pure devotees, exalted devotees, they think, finally, why am I in difficulty? My past misdeeds, don't blame anyone. Do you know when the cow and the bull were beaten mercilessly by the personality of Kali, and when Parikshit came and threatened to kill Kali, he came to the cow and bull, Dharma and Bhumi Devi, and he asked them, identify to me now the perpetrator. Identify to me. And you know what they did? They never identified Kali. They talked to each other, and the first thing they asked each other is, who is the cause of all our difficulty? Who is the remote cause of all this difficulty? It is this material world, our sinful reactions. Finally, it is Krishna as providence. So we don't blame anyone. And such a devotee, instead of wasting time blaming people, Parikshit Maharaj could have blamed Shringi Brahmana, but he didn't waste time. He just decided to sit down for 7 days, increase the quality of his devotional service with his heart, his words, and his body. And ultimately, he attained pure devotional service. Gajendra did the same thing. He never blamed the crocodile, never blamed the elephants, never blamed his wives, for saying, we will have to go. Never blamed his children for saying, I'm sorry, father, but we can't hang around. Everyone deserted him. Everyone left. He was alone. No one else. The people whom he depended on eventually had to leave him. But he didn't hold a grudge against them because of Tattenu Kampam Sushamikshamaну. That's why Prabhupada says so nicely. He quotes, Sridhar Swami in a commentary in the purport. He says, just be alive to Krishna consciousness. My Guru Maharaj used to say, just keep your head above the water of this material ocean. Maybe your body is in it, but just keep your head afloat. As long as you are alive to Krishna consciousness, the kingdom of God is available to you. It is available to you. This is what happened to Gajendra. And so Gajendra now, with his last strength, gave that wonderful lotus to Krishna. And the moment Krishna came, what did he do? When Krishna came, he was smiling, And in that aggrieved position, when he saw Gajendra, immediately he came. As he came, the Gandharvas, the Vidyadharas, and all the Devatas, they showered flowers on him. And they showered flowers on Gajendra. And what did he do? With his disc, he immediately severed the head of the crocodile. And the moment he severed the head of the crocodile, two things happened. Immediately, Gajendra felt relief. Why? Because as the Sudarshan Chakra touched the head of the crocodile, right, it also glanced the feet of Gajendra. The crocodile fell into the water, but surprisingly, the crocodile emerged, not as a crocodile, but as a beautiful Gandharva, known as King Hu. In those days, they had some funny names, King Hu. What a name. I'll never forget that name. I can forget Gajendra, but I can't forget Hu. So what happened? Gajendra was surprised that this great crocodile was actually a king. And Bhagavatam tells us the history of this king. This king Hu was a Gandharva. One time, he was cursed by a great sage known as Devala Muni to become a crocodile. Why? Because one time in the Gandharva Loka, this Hu was enjoying with women in the waters when this great sage came to the water to take bath. Instead of offering him obeisances, he playfully went underwater and pulled the leg of Devala Muni, and in that way insulted him, was not very respectful to him. Devala Muni was filled with compassion, not angry, but he wanted King Huhu to come to the realization of what is the aim of life. Is it the frivolity of basking in the waters with ladies? Or is it to understand the true purpose of why we are here? And so he cursed him and said, since you like the water so much, you become a crocodile. Become a crocodile, it is better. And King Huhu, to his horror, became a crocodile. What appeared to be a curse actually turned out to be compassion. Because if King Huhu continued his life as a Gandharva, he would be steeped in sense gratification. And he would take many, many, many lives before he even became liberated. But because of the mercy of a pure devotee like Devala Muni, who was compassionate to him, what appeared like a curse became a blessing. And therefore, King Huhu was liberated by being touched by the Sudarshan Chakra. And he offered his obeisances, and he was delivered when killed by Narayana. Imagine that. Now, what happened to Gajendra? Gajendra was touched, isn't it? He was, first of all, he took darshan of the Lord. Then the Lord came down and he severed the head of this king. And once he severed the head of the king, what happened to Gajendra? Gajendra was touched directly by Krishna after that. Krishna directly touched Gajendra to relieve him of all the pain. He used the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavatam tells us, used his own personal hand and touched Gajendra. And Bhagavatam tells us the moment Gajendra was touched, he was immediately freed from all material ignorance and bondage. And the moment he was touched there, Bhagavatam tells us he received the liberation of Sarupya Mukti. Sarupya Mukti means he achieved the same bodily features of the Lord. He became dressed. Immediately his whole elephant body transformed. He looked just like the Lord. He became a being with 4 hands and yellow garments. Bhagavatam tells us that. And his body turned into a spiritual body. Srila Prabhupada writes, when one is favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then his gross body attains a spiritual transformation and becomes a spiritual body. Amazing, isn't it? It happened to Dhruva Maharaj also, if you recall. Dhruva Maharaj was touched by the conch shell of Krishna. And the moment he was touched, Sanjeeva Yati, Akila Sakti Dara Swadhamna, he became enlivened. All his senses became enlivened. This touch of Krishna is known in Bhagavatam as Archana Paddhati. Archana Paddhati. It is found in the 8th canto, 4th chapter, 6th shloka, the purport. Prabhupada writes that, Archana Paddhati. What it means is when we perform daily worship of the Lord in the form of deity, so nice. We don't have to become Gajendra. We don't have to become a crocodile and hold someone's feet. No, Prabhupada writes there, all one has to do is daily worship the deity of Krishna. You all have deities of Krishna. Worship the deity. By worshipping the deity, Krishna provides you an opportunity to touch his body. You have to clothe the deity. You have to bathe the deity. You're touching him. That touch enables one to be fortunate enough to get the spiritual body and go back to Krishna. Prabhupada says that. So if we continuously serve Krishna, even in the deity form, one day, by his mercy, we will go back to Krishna. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, even if you don't touch the body, if you don't have a deity, you say, oh, Prabhu, I only have a picture. What do I do? Very simple. Even if you just chant Krishna's names, by chanting Krishna's names, you can attain liberation from this cycle of birth and death. We will become purified of material contamination. This is the result of touching Krishna. And so Gajendra left this material world and he assumed a spiritual body and he went back with Krishna to the spiritual world. It appears as if the pastime of Gajendra has ended. But Shukadeva Goswami does not stop there. He now turns to Parikshit Maharaj and says, Parikshit Maharaj, I have news for you. You may be thinking, how is it that Gajendra was an elephant? But it is also stated by Shukadeva Goswami that before that he was King Indradyumna. What was the story of that? And so Shukadeva Goswami says, Once, long time ago, there was a very great king, a very pious and wonderful devotee king. He was actually a king in the southern province of Dravida, which is in South India. He was the king of the Pandya dynasty, and his name was Indradyumna. So Bhagavatam tells us, this Indradyumna Maharaj was very pious, very pure in his heart. After finishing his duties, he retired from family life and he went to the Malaya Hills. And in the Malaya Hills, he had a small cottage in the ashram. And there he wore matted locks on his head. He was very peaceful and always engaged in austerity. Once he was observing the vow of silence and only remembering Krishna. He was absorbed in the ecstasy of love of Godhead when another great devotee or great sage known as Agastya Muni, he came with an entourage of his disciples. When they walked into the ashram, he realized one thing. He realized that Indradyumna Maharaj had not got up to receive him. He was still seated, he still remained silent, and he did not follow the etiquette of offering a place to sit. So Agastya became very angry. And because he became angry, he cursed the king. What did he say? He said, this king Indradyumna, he's not at all gentle in behavior. He's a king, but he's low and uneducated. He has just insulted a Brahmana. Since he's so dull in his consciousness, may he enter the region of darkness and receive the dull, dumb body of an elephant. And Agastya left. Just when Agastya left, when Indradyumna Maharaj opened his eyes, he heard it, but he was very absorbed remembering Krishna. What did he do? Did he become angry? Did he become upset? Just like Parikshit Maharaj was not upset, Indradyumna Maharaj accepted Agastya Muni's curse. Bhagavatam tells us that. He accepted the curse of Agastya Muni. He welcomed it. Why? Because he saw it as the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is tatenukampam sushamikshamaну. Instead of seeing the negative, we see the hand of Krishna. In a difficult situation, devotees see opportunities. Materialists become very dejected. In the most trying of situations, devotees see Krishna. And materialists, they just curse people. And therefore, in that way, because of devotional service, Indradyumna Maharaj, though he was a great king in previous life, he became an elephant. But because of his previous devotional service, at the point of his crisis, and wanting for him to come quickly back to Krishna, Krishna created a situation where he appeared to be a dull elephant. But at the right time, Krishna gave him the memory to remember Krishna. This tells us a very important point, Prabhus and Matajis, at the end of this pastime. You cannot remember Krishna until Krishna remembers you. If you want to remember Krishna, you can. But the mercy of Krishna is finally his. But if you perform nice devotional service in whatever situation and capacity you are, then even at a point of your life when you are sick, when you may be in a coma, when you have stroke, when your faculties have failed you, don't despair. Just like Krishna helped Gajendra, Krishna will surely help you. He will make you remember mantras that you could remember when you were young, but you may have forgotten because you were old. I remember there was very recently a true story of a lady who suffered from dementia. She was a devotee of the Lord in the US. And for many years, she was doing deity service in the temple. But when she became very old, she had dementia. And dementia means you forget everything, right? She forgot everything except one thing. She kept chanting Krishna's names, but she would never stop. And when the devotees asked her, they would say, Mataji, you have finished chanting your 16 rounds for today. You know what she would say? She would say, no, I haven't finished chanting. Her dementia was such that she forgot that she had chanted 16 rounds, which means she constantly chanted. And at the point when she was leaving her body also, she was chanting Krishna's names, because in her mind she was thinking, I've not chanted today. All of us, we are in a different situation. 16 rounds, finish, Haribol, now we can do whatever we want. But in her case, it was never finished. So you see, Krishna is so powerful that if he wants, he can make us remember him by his grace. So to conclude this pastime, a few things come to mind. One, as Prahlad Maharaj said at the beginning of our time together, material qualification is not the way to satisfy Krishna. Don't be too much in a hurry to achieve material qualification at the cost of cementing your spiritual life. That's very important. Your mind will give you so many arguments, to tell you that, oh, I still need to do this, need to do that before I really take up devotional service. Don't. That time will never come. Don't say, oh, I have to learn how to sing before I can chant Krishna's names. Don't. Just chant. Very important. No material qualification is necessary. Second point, Gajendra did not start his elephant life as a pure devotee. But because of his previous life of working as a devotee and practicing as a devotee, that life was not wasted. Even though he was cursed, it was not wasted. And at the right time, Krishna made him remember, by Krishna's grace, all the shlokas that he remembered from previous life. Why? Because Gajendra fixed his mind with intelligence in his heart. It is the heart, it is our sincerity. Heart means sincerity. It is the sincerity of purpose that attracts Krishna. And as Prabhupada said, sincerity of purpose and voluntary endeavor are the only qualifications needed to come back home, back to Godhead. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandan. Thank you very much for your time.
Hare Krishna, Your Grace. Thank you so much for the wonderful discourse. It is always a privilege to listen to you, Prabhu. And a few takebacks from me from today's class is never blame anyone for the circumstances we are placed, because it is for all Krishna's plan. Chant the Lord's name to be purified and see opportunities in the most difficult situation. The last, like what you said, Prabhu, we cannot remember Krishna until he remembers us. So thank you so much once again, Prabhu, for today's session. And Prabhus and Mataji's, do we have any questions? Please leave it in the chat box or raise your hands. You can unmute yourself and ask these questions to Prabhu. I actually had 2 questions, Prabhu, that was asked. Let me. So the first question is, Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Prabhu, simple bhakti is enough to satisfy Krishna. Is it like offering tulsi? Please elaborate, Prabhu.
Yeah, very nice. Yes. Actually, just offering tulsi to Krishna with love, all the sastras tell us that is sufficient for us to go back to Krishna. Why? Because we recognize when we offer Tulsi Maharani to Krishna that we have no qualifications, that Tulsi Maharani is the pure devotee of the Lord, and that by her mercy, we are praying that Krishna will accept us. In that mood, if we offer Tulsi Maharani to Krishna, Krishna becomes very pleased. Because you glorify his pure devotee, you have taken the shelter of the pure devotee, and nothing pleases Krishna more than that, actually. So it's a very nice point, yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. Next question, turning to the Supreme Lord, how to do that? What is the way?
Turning to the Supreme Lord, how to do that? What is the way? Chaturvida bhajante mam. Krishna says, generally speaking, we all surrender to him in different categories. Very often, sometimes we are in financial difficulty, we turn to Krishna. Some of us are in distress, danger, we turn to Krishna. Some of us are also in need of spiritual knowledge, we turn to Krishna. And some of us are just very inquisitive, we turn to Krishna. Any of these ways, if we turn to Krishna, even if we ask for something material in the beginning, even in that way, if we turn to Krishna, we'll become purified. So in whatever situation, even in your darkest moments or your brightest moments, if you turn to Krishna, we will become purified. That's the best way to answer that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Your Grace. One more question from Gunalan Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu, danger is sent by providence. What about our own karma? If we suffer, is it by the will of the Lord or our own karma?
Very nice question. The best way to answer it is this whole material mechanism that you see here is created by Krishna. In other words, the rules and laws of karma are actually coming from Krishna. We must not forget that every action has a consequence. That rule was not established by you and me. It was established by Krishna to run this material world. Therefore, if we suffer, right, if we have an action that brings about a consequence which results in our suffering, there are 2 parties at play. One It is our action that ultimately started the whole reaction. That we must take responsibility for. That is why in that verse, Tattenukampam, that devotee looks to his own misdeeds and not blame the Lord. But at the same time, the devotee also realizes this whole structure of material universe, the law of karma, who established it? It was Krishna who established it. Therefore, if we understand Krishna is the lawmaker, then if we break the law, whose fault is it ultimately? The lawmaker has to deliver justice, but it's not the fault of the lawmaker. If a country sets a law and you break it, you can't blame the country. Hey, you set the law, that's why it's there. The country will say, I set the law to take care of you, but if you break it, I must punish you, reform you. And therefore, there will always be an overlap of our actions set against the background of providence. That is how we should see this world. Then when we understand that way, we'll not be so confused. Is this will of Krishna? Is it our own karma? It is definitely our own reactions that brought us here. But how we take it now is what makes the difference. Do we take it now that, yes, it is my fault that I have been put into this situation? Instead of wasting time, let me just increase my devotional service. That is the will of the Lord. I hope that is useful. Because otherwise, what happens is we'll always be confused about where does it stop and where does it end. It doesn't stop and end. It always overlaps. That's what we have to remember.
Thank you, Prabhu. One more question from Prema Mataji. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So just clear my understanding. ID is mind and intelligence to be surrendered to the heart. So listening to our conscience in all situations is correct thing to do?
Very good question. The answer is it depends on how developed your conscience is. Criminals don't have much of a conscience. That's why they perform criminal acts. And they will say, well, I did whatever I felt was right, and I chop him into pieces. That's not following your conscience. So our conscience means the voice of the super soul. And the voice of the super soul, Bhagavatam says, will correspondingly become louder and louder according to our devotional sincerity and service. The more we are sincere in devotional service, the more we can hear the voice of the super soul in our conscience. It would speak to us and say, no, even though you want to do it, you should not do it. Whenever you want to do something and your conscience also says, yes, please do it, it's a bit dangerous. But when you want to do something and it's not correct and your conscience says, don't do it, that's Krishna speaking. But in case you say, Prabhu, I'm very afraid, I can't rely on my conscience, then don't rely on it. Rely on hearing your spiritual masters. Rely on hearing the words, the wisdom of your senior devotees. Rely on reading Srila Prabhupada's purports and the sastras. And that is also the voice of conscience. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Your Grace. I think that's all questions we have. Your Grace, thank you once again from all of us. We greatly appreciate your association, Prabhu, and we hope to have more wonderful associations with you, Your Grace, in future sessions. And thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule. Thank you so much.
No, I want to thank everyone, for giving me the chance to always associate with you.
Our pleasure, Prabhu.
Particularly to Vishnu Prabhu, because he's always the source of my inspiration, and to all of you too.
To all of us,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I take my leave now. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
So Hare Krishna, Prabhu's at Mataji's. I just have a very quick announcement. I think all of us are aware that we are going to have this Vedic funeral rites seminar organized by Bhagavad Gita Academy of KL. So it's going to be happening on the 3rd of September and 4th of September. First day is principles and rituals, followed by Tila Tarpanam on the second day. This has been happening for, I think, consecutively 3rd or 4th year. And all of us have been benefiting really, so much. Until and unless something like this incident happens in our own family, we will not know the importance. I'm speaking from my own experience, where I lost my grandmother during COVID time, and these classes and Prabhu's advices helped me so much to, bid a proper goodbye to my grandmother. And I think that is one of the best thing I've done for my grandmother. So please, Prabhus and Matajis, do not miss this chance to come and join us on this seminar. So we have this early bird promotion, which is ending on the 26th of August. So If you register by 26th of August, it's only 40 ringgit per person, and for a family, 80 ringgit. So what's the difference between per person and family? So for a family, which means you can get a few people to log in and if you're only one person, so only one login will be allowed for one person. And Guna Prabhu, can I have the other slide as well? So, and to speak about the speaker of our seminar is Vishnu Chaitanya Prabhu. All of us know Prabhu has gone through a lot of trouble to read up and research about all these Vedic funeral rites and rituals, where I believe you don't get it anywhere else. Prabhu is very kind enough to share this information and whatever Prabhu has learned over the years from various scriptures, and very, very merciful to be giving it to us. So please take this opportunity to pass this word to your friends and family. So yeah, this is a registration giveaway. So for the first 5 devotees who registers 3 new people for the funeral rites seminar will be eligible to win this exciting Vijay KL merchandise, a personalized t-shirt with your name and your favorite Bhagavad Gita quote, 1 pocket Bhagavad Gita and 1 Jagannath bookmark. So Prabhus and Matajis, if you have any questions, reach out to our secretariat or any one of us for the information. So with that note, we have come to the end of the session. We will see you next week. Thank you so much for joining us today, Prabhus and Matajis. All glories to their lordships, Sri Lakshmi Narayana. All glories to Sri Radha Madhava Ashtasakhi. All glories to Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra. All glories to Sri Sri Gauranitai. All glories to the Sampradaya Acharyas. All glories to His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna, Prabhus and Matajis.